Welcome to the Cryptozoology Show, Lochness Monster Part 15, Strange Water Cryptids. So this shows some odd water cryptid carcasses, an examination of the often used whale shark explanation, or whales or typical sort of things, and I'll show you a few interesting ones where even skeptics use these as examples, saying that they're a whale shark, but that's not determined. so, so we'll show you some interesting things here: killer syringes, strange sea monsters, a lot of different weird stuff. First, we'll talk about a guy I interviewed ages ago. I hooked into some terrifying thing in the same river and almost got yanked into the East River by some kind of Jaws-like creature of some sort. And there is some not only terrifying creatures in the water, there's also some terrifying individuals and other things, strange things. So I'd believe anything out of this East River, but this crazy diver was down there looking for something, and he claimed that he saw this giant clam-like thing that tried to sort of snap at him, right? so I like the idea that this killer giant mutant monster freshwater clam of some sort. But they've done testing. There's been stories where people have apparently died from going down, and then the giant clam will grab you. But really, they actually move their mouths from sensing of light and things like that. And of some of the species, when they go to close, they don't have, it's like frilled, right? These real monster knowing ones. So it's hard for them to sort of to do that. I don't know if it's impossible to say that they do or don't, but I mean, there is these legends, right? There must be some kind of maybe basis to it, but typical freshwater clams or some other ones, if this guy was, you know what I mean, accurate in his description of it, the Titanic of size here, sounding from the sounds of it, because he said that could grab him, sort of, right? so it sounds pretty out there, right? But the thing is, so let's say it was like a 4 or 5 foot wide sort of super clam here, right, of some sort, okay? The thing is once like that, they actually can lock full solid shut. So I don't know how strong their muscle would be or anything but it's hard because I never had one when I grabbed them. None of them ever sort of where my thumb was in there enough to sort of for them to clamp down. So I don't actually know this answer, but nevertheless, I know that they can close their mouths a much more solid, at least, than these typical ones that are blamed of these giant clams that grab at people. It's just because they have open sort of ridges and stuff, so when it closes down, it doesn't sort of seemingly do work the same as some of the other clams. But whatever the case, an interesting story there. So these rivers had everything from mermaids to porpoises, and just like our famous Ottawa River and Canal and stuff, there's a lot of mutant sort of stuff going on out there. Here's an update I had put on a previous show about giant sonar readings. I ran across these things myself, exactly like this sort of thing. A solid sort of object, right? And it's coming in and out of the screen, but it's not a school of fish here and stuff. You can actually see the sort of the defined sort of bottom little parts, or the possibly two some kind of sets of fins there of some sort, but tapered tail is sort of very solid object, and the thing's coming in and out, and it's huge. I mean, that's absolutely huge. Right? So, I mean, I can't verify 100% what she says is it was, I forget what they said, it was some wild sort of length, about 50 feet long or whatever, but anyways, I could tell you this much, that from seeing recordings similar to this, for sure it would be fairly big here. It would have to be pretty huge. Right? It would have to be depend on their model and different things, right? Because cones are different and sort of things like that. It's not as but for sure that isn't a school of fish. That's a solid sort of object there, and you can't explain. A log should be sort of vertical coming up or something like that. It shouldn't be able to float perfectly and it's coming in out of the screen. That's another thing, because I've actually seen this where the thing comes in, he's gone, then he comes back and he's going against current. It can't be a log or stuff like there's things, right? Like certain things about it. So, hey, very interesting. And it was certainly that Lake Labinker is one wild sort of lake, man. In some of these lakes in Russian ancient times, the locals, to get even, like if you were an asshole, they would actually chuck you into the sort of lake. And these people, a lot of them never came back, right? So absolutely fascinating if you think about that. I mean, that's pretty terrifying. Right? So, I mean, people are skeptical, but at all the places worldwide, these Russian lakes have a lot of really good sort of stuff here. I mean, that other one that I told you that may be from Labinker, I still can't verify that, but wherever it was filmed by this Dante guy in, I think it was 213 or something, and the absolutely most astonishing sort of film. There's another one from Seneca Lake that's similar like creature, and also from Makshalash, and a few other ones that are similar like sort of thing, right? And so there's a lot of stuff, and I'll actually show you a real carcass of one found in a trench down in an area, okay, in the Mediterranean. I'll show you later. That'll blow your mind, because any person that if they can't say it's a whale, or they can't say it's a seal, or they can't say any of these things, and it looks very sea serpentish, like extremely so. So it actually does look like one of these great worms that they described already, and fits perfectly in the size of the types that they would say, right, of one of the types of species. So my personal belief, like I said, and I'll show you this in the books, that a lot of these lakes and things, I believe, have underwater connections to the sea, and or through river systems, or both sort of methodologies, and that creatures go wayward, and some of them will either get possibly trapped, where they haven't figured out ways of getting out, and actually somehow breed in there. It's feasible if a few come in a group or something at first, right? And that sort of thing, or that the creature stays in there and is responsible for sightings for quite a while because they live a long time. And maybe the same sort of creature has the same sort of habit that occasionally, so even now, let's say the lake monster goes away, 40 years later, a new, let's say, elephant seal or some kind of creature, anything, whatever it is that's decided to go up there, it could be anything from a sea monster to a known one, they do the same behavior and end up in the same sort of situation, right? And you see this with sharks, to all kinds of creatures, where certain bodies of water, more than one's been reported over the ages, like over several hundred years, showing the repeatness of these sorts of things, right? So I provide you a lot of different things that people don't think about, that they really like, because there's a lot of information that's BS out there, like, as a, for instance, these newest ones there, I'm seeing these people are way underestimating the size of that Marianas Trench shark that I showed you. Some guys claiming it's only 20-some feet long. I mean, I find that ludicrous. There's clearly at the beginning some sharks that could be, the lowest I would believe would be like maybe 6-7 feet long, sort of thing, in that sort of range. And clearly when they're up against the cages, they're not the size of sort of the cage here. So you have this problem that the cage has to be at least like, let's say they took even a miniature cage that was 3 feet long, and it happened to be that all these sharks were miniaturized, and it was, no matter what, that creature is still beyond these proportions of what they're claiming, right? So, like, I mean, that's sort of ridiculous. You can see shark cages where sharks come up and it's a great big great white, and the dude's like 15 feet plus on him, sort of thing, and his head isn't even like a quarter the width or half the width of, depending on the type of cage they were using and stuff like that. Of a lot of these ones, it's like maybe sometimes even less than that, like 20% sort of, right? So you have these logistics that when you can see on that film there, that thing looks titanic. And even the bait that they're using looks to be fairly large, like probably a 3 to 5 foot long sort of fish here of some sort, in that sort of range. So that's another issue. It's hard to believe, like, why would they use miniaturized? They had a diving cage. Yeah, I mean, why make them, like, unless it was completely fraudulent and somehow they were able to convince this bigger fraudulent shark to come by. Like, I mean, the whole thing sounds ridiculous. So, in my belief, anyways, that shark is what most people will state that is much bigger than that, anyway. So, for the ones that are claiming it's only around 20 feet, you're smoking the local. Because I mean, I believe in being conservative in these things too and all that sort of stuff, but that's outrageously too small. Now, here's a monster I cannot explain whatsoever. This is not a whale. Anybody that claims that is, again, smoking major loco. This creature's head is like some kind of giant cow's, man. Absolutely bizarre. He's got huge sort of nostril-like sort of stuff here and some funny big ear. This thing was freaking huge. It was like 32 feet long that they measured, but I suspect this creature probably had some big long tail and some part of it's missing somewhere. I doubt that it's sort of short and compact, fat, wide like that, but it's definitely not a whale. The eyeball is atrociously huge, right? There's no sort of breathing like sort of thing up at the thing. This is interesting, this weird black sort of rib-like stuff coming out of the side of it, completely different than sort of, that's unusual, and it's coming out at a strange angle too. The skin is quite odd. And also there's an interesting ridge up at the top of this sort of thing that you can see. It's like sort of a ridgy, dragonish, sturgeony sort of ridge of some sort. There could be also possible hair on it as well. Although that could be just some of the skin's fibers, like what some sharks do, or different things a little bit might be sort of stringing there and stuff like that. Hard to know, but I can tell you this much, that this thing has perfect symmetry. The eyeballs are not sort of the mouth. The whales don't fit like that. The eyeball is just above the sort of beak line. There should be a great big open thing here. This is not like that. It's sort of, its mouth is shaped very sort of different here. So it's extremely strange, whatever it is, you know, but it floated up in 217 and sort of, right, and absolutely extremely interesting sort of one. But I mean, if you look at it really, like seriously, that head and facial features and stuff is nothing whale-like at all. I mean, whatsoever. And they don't seemingly, like, I mean, this thing seems to have some kind of weird appendage, like a giant ear coming out the side of it there. I find that extremely interesting. I mean, but you can see that it's huge, like great big width, eh? Like it's, even for whales, a lot of whales aren't that wide. This thing is quite wide. And his head is, and he's got this long sort of beak to him and stuff like that. Just a very fascinating creature. What it is, I can't tell you. I mean, I have no idea. It was around this Layette Island, right? But it challenges explanation, really, because, I mean, any person that claims this is a whale, I think, is a ridiculous statement. I mean, it's not a whale. And not only that, it can't be a seal or anything. It's way too huge to be any sort of the other sorts of stuff. So now you're into something that, you know what I mean, there's no explanation. I have no idea what that thing is. But again, look at the face on that. I mean, it's extremely, and it's not, even though it's eaten away in some parts and all that kind of stuff, this facial sort of area is not actually eaten that much away and sort of thing like that. And this giant nostril areas and the eyes, the size of the eyes, and this funny ear-shaped lobe, and this peculiar rib design here where seemingly it has like black like bones inside of it of some sort, like very peculiar looking. Right. And the skin is weird, and it has like this sort of bumpish sort of dragon like sort of stuff going up on the top. I mean, extremely interesting creature. Anyways, I have haven't the foggiest. This one's not one I can sort of give you any sort of reasonable explanation. Here's another mystery one that is completely. This one again was blamed on a basking shark, and then another one said it was what else did they say? A whale or something. But I mean, these things are not really fitting in here properly with this. Okay, this thing weighed at least 1,000 tons and it was 50 feet long. Okay, look at the gigantic eyeball on that thing, and you can clearly see that that is actually really its eyeballs, because on this side here you can see the same sort of protrusion coming out and stuff like this. He has this extremely strange bone-like beak, and no sort of whale has this sort of thing like this, and you can actually see the creature does seem to have some kind of miniature like possible teeth there, but they're different. They're like little spikes that are built right into the bone, sort of like little nodules sticking out. And he has an extremely strange bird-like sort of a beak sort of thing like to him and that. But I mean, there's piles of reasons this can't be a basking shark or a whale as they're claiming. Here you can see up at the top there's no sort of air, sort of breathing hole there of any sort. It seems to have a turtle-like shell that's extremely strange. Okay, but you can see here on the front, he's got some kind of like very similar, like what a big turtle would sort of have, although he's much bigger than any known sort of turtle. Okay, also his ridge-like tail at the end is very spike-like a prehistoric turtles. The big snapping turtles get these similar like spikes and this sort of things, but it's his eyeballs are titanic and they're not actually eaten away yet. They're puffed out. So, I mean, there's no way that's like, and his nose structure and his jawline, I should have got him to do like a drawing of the jawline and stuff so you can sort of look at it. This is very beaked, like sort of more, and there's certain kinds of fishes out there that have these kinds of things like that. So this is sort of one of these mixture cryptids where you don't have... where the creature has different sorts of anatomies of different kinds of animals, like a hodgepodge, and then therefore each expert is claiming this, overstating because they recognize this part of this or that, but really this can't fit into any of these. Like, there's no known turtle sort of 50 or tortoise 50 feet long, right? So that's what, and 1,000 tons, I mean, that's pretty wild. And none have eyeballs like this. Usually turtles and stuff, like most of any of these other sorts of creatures that they're blaming it on, their eyeballs aren't big like that. All right. So, like, even if it was puffed out from ooze and stuff, this creature has a huge eyeball radius. And you can see it's puffed out on the other side there like that. It has this strange sort of ridge-like sort of stuff, and definitely a fin like very similar to some kind of tortoise-like sort of thing. So this is definitely not a known species. I can't match anything really out there, even though it's decayed a bit and even though everything. The explanations of giving it a basking shark is ridiculous. Nothing like a basking shark at all. They don't have tails like that. They don't have a sort of some kind of shell on them. They don't have giant eyes the size of mega squids and stuff. Right? They don't have sort of weird sort of shaped flippers even like that. And it's further sort of back. There's no sort of indication of any sort of thing here. So I would suggest there's these rippled areas way up in front of past its fin, up towards its head, and you can see this weird sort of divot there. I suggest that that's its gill line. So I believe this to be some kind of thing that actually breathes sort of underwater. So even though he may have a turtle-like structure or different sort of things, it could be possibly he's actually an underwater breather of some sort. Because if you look at sort of, it's too bad, it's hard to sort of blow this one up, but if you look at that edge, it actually looks like a gill line, what you would see on any sort of typical fish. and it points up and then comes down and it's just puffed out a bit, and it would be attached to where the jaw line is and this sort of thing, right? So they're all sort of right beside each other, right? So that's very sort of that. But this back part is so like more like a turtle, right? That, I mean, it's fascinating anyways, but it's certainly anybody claiming this is a whale or a whale shark, stop smoking, making sure a little. You gotta stay, calm down a little bit, because it's not. You can't explain things like things can't have. Basking sharks can have shells, and they don't have all of a sudden turtle tails like from rotting. It doesn't work that way. So, even though some things may look like some sort of creature that you're familiar with, other parts are not. If they don't match, then it's still not a match, right? Sort of thing. And I mean, that thing's quite interesting. Whatever it is, even if the dimensions are a bit over exaggerated or not, or whatever, I can't find any explanation that would fit this, right? So, and I even at his beak line, but it could be that it's eaten away, but you'd think you would see sort of holes there. I don't even see like it's his nose for sure there, but I don't see like the breathing sort of whole nostril areas, right? So it could have snapped off like little parts here. Could have been a beak too, like the bottom is, because you can see there's some kind of thing here where part of his jaw might have busted off or something or whatever, right? But I mean, look at the mouth, the gargantuan sort of wide opening jaw, pivoting jaw he probably has, right? So absolutely fascinating creature, but the Bahamas beast definitely out there. If my mother had seen that down there laying in the beaches and stuff like that, she would have freaked out. But absolutely fascinating. So whatever he is, right? Absolutely interesting. Here, this interesting sea carcass from Russia that had floated in. There's some bizarre sort of, even though people again see the whales sort of thing, there is some issues here. Okay, let's look at some interesting sort of things. Here's a whale that they're claiming that is, okay? If you notice, the top beak is shorter than the bottom beak, but in this creature it's longer and shorter, but they're actually closer together. They're almost identical. Also notice that these whales have a big, large sort of cranium, sort of that comes up, right? So if you notice, that creature has an extremely flat head. So if it's rotted away like they're claiming, and let's say this is the side ribs that they're claiming and this sort of stuff like this, right? Then this area, the height of that should be busting through there, and you should see a great big sort of crest there, which you don't see. Okay, so now, as you can clearly see here, there's a large sort of crest of this here, right? So you can see that. Then also look at the height of what these strips come out up at the top, right? And then also the ribs, if you notice, on whales are actually flat. They sort of, they're almost like as if you took a bars of copper and sort of flattened them out to make a bracelet, sort of like they're more shaped like that. Yet clearly this creature has much more rounded, thicker, sort of rounded sort of ribs. So that's another sort of issue. The beaks is not, this creature is almost identical from top to bottom. The bottom one seems a micro bit shorter, but just barely, whilst with the here you can see quite a bit of difference, right? So you can't sort of add things now and saying it's rotting away when you can't add extra length or features from rotting process. That's BS, right? So, but here, as you can see, right? So yes, the sides look similar, and I can see why they would say some suggested that possibly the rib cage rotted and started pushing up sideways, so now you're seeing it. But still, again, you do have problems. You can clearly see how flat they are, but this creature has much more sort of rounded sort of things. Also, sort of this, besides the crest issues and stuff like that, if the eye position seems to be a little bit on the lower micro bit, like just barely, a slight little tinge different than typical. So, but anyways, that's not conclusive enough. I mean, that could be any little thing, right? But still, you have these sort of things here, right? So. Here's another whale that they were claiming that possibly could be, but again, we have these same sort of problems. If you notice, the bottom jaw in this species is longer, right? But on this one, it's shorter, right? So, and this one's quite significantly shorter, the top beak, yet on this one, it's quite longer, right? So, this, and also it's much more rounded. These ones are much more sort of pointed that they have, right? So, the big bump here on the sort of head is missing again, like I said. So there's like, you can't sort of, you see, like, you got a thickness, right? So even if there's flesh there, right, and it's good covering it, you'd still have to see the shape there, right? And it would actually show up even more because the skin's rotting and pushed away and these sorts of things, yet you're not seeing that. It looks very sort of flat-wise, right? Now, the end section has, like many sort of creatures, vertebrae that are similar to basking sharks, to all kinds of different things like that. But the whales are actually, they come down, they taper like that here. You can see at the end they sort of get a little bit like that. So that one aspect is feasible of still being in a sort of whale-like sort of a family of some sort. But here, this is a later sort of thing, and now it's sort of rotted more sort of things like this. But some things, it's really not, like if you actually look at this creature, he sort of hasn't really actually, I don't presume, lost tons of flesh. Because this actually was taken before this guy seen this. It wasn't as rotted back then, right? And then this is a picture sort of taken after. Okay? So that's another thing. Now it's pushed out a little bit more rottage and things like that. And also there's a very, very sharp, great big beak sort of tooth there that is sort of, it seems large for sort of what... and it's certainly, so then you have this sort of issue where it's strange. It obviously, if it only had one tooth there, it probably had others, so there's no way of identifying better, because the tooth count's probably going to be wrong no matter what, right? So, but it does look quite spiky and sort of interesting. I'm not able to blow it up well enough to clearly define it, but it looks razory sharp and sort of like quite sort of sharp and jagged pointed, right? So sort of thing like that. So that these are interesting sort of things to it, right? Like, you know, so it's interesting. Anyways, it's on the fence of exactly what it could be, because like here you can see there's similar like teeth and sort of things like that. So some of it does have some definitely whale features, but then other parts do not, and there's no seemingly blowhole. You can see up at the top, sort of thing like that. So that's another sort of a issue that's a bit strange. See here, if you look up, it doesn't, I don't see any sort of evidence of that, right? So that's another sort of issue. But anyways, it's definitely, to say that it's, yeah, you know what I mean, there is some problems, right? So there's a few sort of things like that that aren't matching up. So if it is one, it may be an unknown sort of one. Now here's one that I can say more conclusively is not what they're claiming. This was claimed to be a basking shark put on the news. Okay, this is not a basking shark. Okay. Yes, I can understand that they would think these similar sort of rings here are similar looking to a basking sharks, but there's a huge problem. Do you see this beak here? Basking sharks do not have gigantic beaks that are equal length. Like this thing has a prehistoric long gigantic beak. Now in this photo you can't see it that well, but that's where it starts, where the black line, the first one is, and the second one there. And sadly, because the beak is actually similar like color, it's as dull like color to the stones around, it blends in and people aren't noticing this. But here on this one you can clearly see it better. So here I put at the end of the beak, not exactly the beginning of beak. There's a little bit more to the left, but in this here you can see that first one is around center of the beak of actually where the beak center is. It's so the first one you see and the second one is close. You can actually see a line ridge all the way that comes along at where the beak splits. Okay, so it's impossible that this is a whale shark. Okay, his beak is way too long. Okay, you can even see it better. Okay, and I'm pointing exactly in the middle center where his beak ends over here. And that's not rocks. This is actually one solid beak that comes out of his nose, and his eyeball is in a different position than what a basking shark's is. And I'll show you that skeptics have been using a fake sort of thing that isn't actually 100% true. I'm not disagreeing with them fully that these things are impossible, but I'm going to show you some anomalies to the people that created these fake theories that passed this off all over the internet, but really aren't standing really on solid ground. And I'll show you some interesting things here. This is very interesting. Okay, here's one of the few images you can actually find in the universe here of an actual basking shark skeletal remains. This is exactly what it looks like, okay? Exactly like this. So believe it or not, they don't really have, they just have this sort of spinal up on the top here, right? And this is his nose up in the front, and that's why it's longer when you see their jaws are equal, right? Okay, but this area here extends out further, okay? So then the tail comes out down here and stuff like this, and this area is here sort of swats around it, and there's also little bone-like sort of stuff coming out this way, little cartilage-like things going this way, and it circles around the rest of the sort of body, encasing it on both sides. But anyways, that's what it would look like this, and then this is the sort of little pieces of fin structure here, okay? So that's the basic sort of what the skeletal sort of looks like. The rest, of course, they can't there is no skeletal down here, and so then these other parts sort of, they won't pick up in the skeletal sort of thing. But to give you an idea, you can see how it actually starts as more at the top of the sort of head, okay? It lays on it like this, and it comes across like sort of equal across, like as if you laid a ruler on top of an edge or something. It's sort of on the top of it going along it that way, okay? So here's the thing though, is in a lot of skeptics journals, this is where this fake scientists came up with some of this stuff ages ago, right? They'll pass these things off, but when they're not showing you some things here, okay? Each time this means that this extra sort of cartilage like in the front here has to fall off, okay? Then the eyeball has to change position now and go more in the center area. You can clearly see that that's in that base there. His eyeball is actually, there's nose in front, but this is not the case in the real sort of, this is an actual mold of a basking shark's skeletal remains, right? So it's one right in the British Museum, so it's 100% accurate. So what I'm stating to you is you can clearly see that his eyeball's right there at the sort of thing like this. So in order for this to, now that front to, this has to have busted off, okay, which you don't see that because there's actually skin all still around it. So that's not feasible, because then this part should still be locked inside that skin, okay? The next thing is then let's say that this actually did fall out somehow, whatever, right? It wiggled through the skin and came out. Okay, so now you got this shape left here, this Lochness monster head here, the bottom part that we're looking at, okay? Okay, but now look at the eye position in the sort of ones. This is the ones they always use. And the creature you actually see, I don't have, but that's the beast, the drawing of the beast. And you can see where his eye is. It's actually further back from there. So it would be more like as if his eyeballs was more in the center of this jaw instead of there. So these are anomalies that you can't all of a sudden now change and make it fit your theory and make now his eyeball change completely different positions in the skull area. So I find this peculiar. Now here's another one blamed as a basking shark, okay? This is not a basking shark. They don't have a beak this long like that, okay? Right, and this thing is very sort of snake-like. His eyeballs in a different sort of position here, sort of thing like that. And also another sort of odd anomaly is sort of it's very flat, like more like a sawfishish, rayish, any kind of weird sort of thing. So it could be very possibly related to some sort of creature similar, but it's definitely not a basking shark. And I mean, that's sort of ludicrous. You can see where the neck starts. Do you notice on this creature, it's actually below his head crest, whilst on these things, it's actually above. And people miss these things, and they don't seem to understand these things. So I'm tired of listening to critics talking kind of silly stuff that where they're saying this and that is a piece of seaweed or it's always a whale shark, when they got this answer from a skeptic ages ago and it's been passed on used, but they're not actually holding water, like, because most people aren't educated on decomposed bodies, and I don't claim to be the world's greatest expert on them either and things like that, but I can clearly you can see in this picture here that the skull line is above sort of the thing. So the vertebrae starts way lower down, like in typical creatures, a lot more in the center of the jawline, sort of thing like that. And clearly this does not occur on that sort of thing. So that's an anomaly there too, right? And sort of like this. And even though they do look similar, these vertebrae, they actually also look like very many similar vertebrae of other similar creatures, right? So, I mean, you can't use that as the explanation just because they look similar. That doesn't conclusively show that. Now, here's the next one. This is the same, another one passed on, right? Okay. Sorry, here, now look at this one here. Another catty carcass at first was proclaimed to be catty, but then some scientist guy came along and he proclaimed it was a basking shark, okay? I have some severe problems with this. Okay. So this one's closer here, where the eyeball is intact of the sort of correct area. Also, his mouth is more similar in structure than clearly this creature's. Okay. However, there is some problems and some big ones. Okay. Basking sharks do not have the eye. This creature's eyeball is actually the face on this creature's is slightly different. It's more like an angler fish's, or like even a largemouth bass's, or other kinds of ones, walleyes, other things, where it's a bit sort of like this funny sort of triangular roundness to it, right? And where the eyeball here is actually more in the front of the creature. These basking sharks, the eyeballs are much smaller per se in general than for the size of this skull, okay? And it's positioned different. It's sort of like more up, sort of at a different sort of angle like this. This creature has gigantic sort of huge eyes, and his rib cage is sort of goes along still intact. I agree the tail is similar and stuff like this, but what my suggestion is, it's just another species of fish, however, not a basking shark, because of these couple of things. Okay, here you can clearly see in the bottom sort of jawline and in the top, this creature has very spiked fang sort of teeth, and lots of them spreading across. Now, whale sharks do have sort of teeth, okay? And basking sharks. Okay, sorry, but here's what they look like. They're almost like a clam, and they lay flat down. They're not like pointy, sharp, triangular sort of teeth like this. So this is a problem here because you can clearly see these are quite thin, very pointy like teeth. Okay. Also, the jaw is very V-shaped. It's much more, and his bottom jaw is not, which is very similar to certain kinds of predator-like fish and things like this, and these teeth are much more predator-like. So I'm just not, I doubt highly that this was a basking shark. The eyeballs is incorrect. It's way too large of eyes. You can see on the other side that it had the same thing because there's a blackness there. You can see a part of it. It's just because it's facing out this way. So this this fish's face eyeballs are a bit more forward in the front more than what typical fishes are, and much larger. The eye socket is absolutely huge. On a typical cranium of a fish, you're only going to have the eyeball would be a very smaller section of the complete length of the front of its jaws, sort of, right? But this creature, the eye is almost covering the entire sort of bite radius, like the head radius of the top part. And so I find these things sort of like, so I could see again why the guys sort of made these, but remember it is missing a mid-fin here, and you don't see any sort of area where that would have, like, there's no even evidence of bone in any sort of spot here. It also has a funny ridge-like thing on it, which is slightly different than what these basking sharks have. But I'd say the key sort of thing is these vampire-like teeth that it has, and the shape of its mouth is different. So yes, it probably is some kind of fish, but I'd suggest it was an unknown one or whatever, right? Like something definitely different than what they're stating anyways, right? So that's... Now, I love this one here. Here's another catty corpse that was... proclaimed by a scientist. Now here's his statement. He said it was seaweed, garbage, and something else all mixed together. Okay, so I think this most retarded sort of oh yeah, that's what it was. And a clam that created its eyeballs. Okay, so here's the sort of problems here. Okay, this is not seaweed. This was a real sort of animal of some sort. Okay. But it's definitely not seaweed. Okay, you can count the vertebrae as you can see them clearly. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Now it turns a bit, so it's hard to know, 16, 17, 19, 20. It could have like 20-some vertebrae here, okay, coming along. You can clearly see the sections cut out. Some parts are more rotted, but the vertebrae is still there. Okay, so this is not a piece of seaweed. This was its fins of some sort that actually seemed to have snapped off. Okay, because you actually can see they're like a line, like as if some of the fins on sharks, other things, they don't have like 5 million big bones in there or something. The thing just, once it starts to rot off, it'll just sort of peel right off, sort of thing, right? So it's quite feasible that this one got ripped a little bit and this one's better intact, or something, or whatever, right? Like, but they're right across from each other. They both have that same tear in the front, like as if it came off the side of the creature, or it could be underneath it. It could be some kind of weird sort of thing. I can't explain the splits here up at the top. That could be whatever, right? I mean, it could be anything from rot to whatever, something stepped on it or bit it or something. I have no idea, but here's more parts of it here, right? So you can see the closest of them. But you can see the same ridge-like structure on all three sorts of things. Okay, so look at the left one, look at the right one, and look at the top one. Especially the top one, you can actually see these little spike-like, hair-like stuff coming all the way along it, right? So this guy claims this is seaweed. I mean, I can clearly see, even in these two side fins, whatever they were, right, that was sort of probably part of this creature's sort of structure here. Now, here's the other thing. Where is he here? Okay. You can also see perfect symmetry. There's two ears here. There's a left ear and a right ear, and they're actually the same. It's perfect symmetry. If you went across there with a ruler, went onto the other side, you would see it's the same sort of object on both sides, right? And sort of stuff like this. So his claim is that that middle eyeball. Now I've looked up at it close, and I can understand it does have a little bit of sheen like a clam, but I've also seen eyes that look like this from creatures. So again, this would be a presumption. The odds of a clam landing in the creature's eye socket would be so slim. I mean, really. And then for it to fit perfectly where it dove in and somehow got himself half sideways and sort of to give you the even better effect. I mean, it's a bit out there, so I doubt this. So that probably really was the creature's eyes. Now, what this thing was, I mean, that's really out there, right? But I mean, it's certainly an interesting one, right? A bizarre carcass that I don't have an explanation for, but it certainly wasn't a piece of seaweed. Now, this one here is much more sort of a actual, real, mysterious carcass that for sure I could say more on the positive side is not a basking shark. Here's another character trying to claim a basking shark. Okay, here, now we'll go back to this sort of fossil, okay. Where are we here? Here's my buddy. Okay. Now look at his top sort of fin here. Okay. You can see right along. Now follow up to the top. You can see his big caudal fin here. Okay. So. Now, hang on. Now clearly look at this creature's fin. Its shape completely different, comes at a very different sort of angle. It's much more centralized at the last little bit of these vertebrae, whatever they would be, right? And you can see three spikes coming off of it and this ancient prehistoric-like tail. It has sort of weird flippers here, okay, up at this sort of thing like that. And an interesting leathery-like sort of like body all the way along, a camel-like head. Completely sort of different, right? So, I mean, how anybody could claim this is a whale or a basking shark, you're smoking the loco. I mean, seriously, that's really, like, if you look at this sort of, like, this is supposed to be a basking shark. Look at the fin right at the end, okay? Okay, you can see the tail fin, okay? So, again, look at this fin. I mean, the difference is extraordinary, right? And very, very different sort of creature here completely, right? And most of all, here's another thing too. If you sort of now look at the giant beak on this front one here, and his underjaw is much, much shorter. His eyeballs come way back and they sit way up at the top of his sort of head, right? Whilst this creature claimed to be the same monster, has eyeballs much bigger, a completely different shape, mouth, and head, and so does this creature. Yet all of them are supposed to be a basking shark, right? So, I mean, these things are like, you know what I mean, too much a loco. Right? So that's a fascinating sort of one. It was found inside of a whale, so this whale actually attacked this sort of thing, right? And I mean, so he ate him, and he was still fresh. He wasn't eaten away that much, and this his acidy stuff would sort of start eating it down and things like that. But I mean, for anybody to claim this was a whale shark or anything like this, I just find this sort of ludicrous and definitely not a whale shark. So, and it matches very much like the sort of Caddy film I even showed you and the sort of other thing. So, for sure, Caddy sort of would be. This creature exists in the highest of likelihood, and that's probably one of its corpses. Because the head on that is very different from any of the other sorts of things like that. His eyeballs positioned in a different sort of area. He has a fascinating gaping sort of mouth with leathery like stuff going all along it. He's not actually that broadhead. yet, and his fin structure is completely intact, and there's no sharks that looks like that or any of that sort of stuff. There's a few prehistoric ancient sharks, like ones like that, where they have sort of weirder sort of tails and stuff, and there's some prehistoric ones from ages ago that had one similar to this, at least they suspect anyways. But for sure, this guy is not sort of a basking shark, and it's certainly not a whale. So, and I mean, there's no sort of evidence of a blow. The head's very different. You would see these spike-like sort of stuff coming out. He's way too thin to sort of around and stuff. But like, there's too many things. This creature isn't eaten away that much yet. So again, if it was any of these other ones. Now here's another interesting one here, where the same thing was passed off, and they're claiming it's a basking shark, okay? But here's some huge, two problems. Okay, yes, I agree, the top vertebrae sort of area there looks similar to this bottom section down here. However, do you notice something right away? Do you notice these great big sort of planks going all the way down it, okay? That shouldn't sort of be there, right? So that's one thing, okay? That's an extra sort of set of stuff here. But now besides that, you have a sort of this crest on here, okay? And this thing has actual bunt rigid crest. That neck is incredibly long. I don't see any sort of thing of proof of that there was any sort of gill line there of any sort that I could actually see. And his mouth looks perfectly even tapered from top to bottom, and he looks like he has a fairly large eye, and it's positioned sort of, it's bigger, and it's sort of positioned slightly different than some of the other creatures that are claimed to be a basking shark. So again, we have another sort of conundrum here where some of the parts match up, but others don't, right? So these are ones where, you know, people will still always fight on the fence, but I'm more in the suspect that none of these ones actually were. But this one here especially, this was claimed to be a basking shark, okay? So now look at the size of this giant man. I don't know this giant, whoever this guy was. This dude was a monster, and even the dude that was with him was fairly huge, because look at these people here in the background. You can see people standing around. So let's say they were even shorter Europeans, I don't know, like 5'4" or something, okay, right? Okay, now this person here is fairly taller, so they're pushing more around the sort of 6 foot range possibly, and that sort of thing. But then now look at these two dudes, right? And look at this monster. I mean, so this guy is huge. I would suspect he's well in the 7 foot something, could even be over 8 feet tall possibly. I mean, that guy is an absolute monster. Extremely huge, because I'm looking at all the different average individuals here, and most people are at least going to be 5 foot something even in those times, okay? So, you know, when you're this guy here, one of them standing, I mean, they're way below, and he's sort of kneeling down. He isn't at a full sort of erect sort of thing, right? But now here's another one that was claimed to be, okay, a basking shark now, okay? So now look at how many people here. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So you got about 20 people there, roughly. Okay, I might have missed one or something or whatever, but somewhere in this sort of range. And then there's open spaces. So really probably, let's say like a 2-4 of Canadian could fit in there, right? The average individual, no matter what, is probably somewhere around a few feet wide, sort of like, and I mean, there's going to be way wider, but so whatever the case, like in this sort of range, right? Right there, just alone with this sort of group of people, you must be, with all these open spaces and stuff like this. I would imagine you're already at 40 feet here or so, just in this area. So then there's way still more of a tail and sort of stuff like that. So according to these scientists, they can't get this big, right? Yet this was a basking shark, according to him. And if you see the eyeball, again, the jaw is different and sort of like this. And the bone structure starts way more down further, seemingly, than, like, again, I showed you on the only reel that I can find of an actual real proper skeleton of a basking shark, okay? So see how it sits way more up on the sort of frame up here and sort of lays across, like there's like a groove in its head, almost sort of like it's laying sort of on it like that, and is being sort of propped or sort of balanced on that sort of thing, right? Whilst with these sorts of stuff here, some of these look like they're starting lower, sort of, right? So, I mean, it's hard to know, but I mean, again, I think this basking shark thing is used all the time for anything that they can't sort of find an answer for, right? And here's another one. Here's a typical other sort of one, right? And you can see how it works. It actually lays more, like I said, it's up at the topper sort of area. But some of these photographs and stuff like that indicate seemingly more starting in the mid-center of the neck area, right? And sometimes things are missing or odd stuff, right? So, I mean, they're not really good explanations, because lots of creatures, all kinds of sharks, all kinds of 5 million things, have similar, like, sort of vertebrae-like stuff. So it's not conclusive enough to really actually make your statement, right? And you can see here, like, you notice how these guys, when they do their drawings to show this sort of theory, right? There's 5 billion that will use this sort of one here, but you can see here how he's drawing the neck in is actually not really exactly how it works, and sort of lays up more a little bit up on the top and sort of things like that, and they'll add extra features and things that isn't actually even in the original sorts of stuff. So these are the sort of interesting sort of things that there is some sort of problems here where some of these things don't match up sometimes, right? So I can't conclusively 1,000,000% say, but I can say much more. I can tell you, let me see here. This one is not a basking shark, and the highest of probability, much more so. I highly, highly doubt this one is as well, but certainly this one is not. All right. Okay. I find that a ridiculous risk. Okay. But anyways, this what I'm saying is there is some problems, and you can notice how the heads each time sort of different, and in the highest probability, this one is not either. All right. So, but anyways, it's just another sort of interesting ones that, you know, people will argue about, but I still find them interesting. So, but here's some more interesting sort of ones I was telling you about. I showed you in the previous show there, a dragon-like thing that was found up on this sort of beach. They're speaking in Spanish. I presume this is Spanish, but I can't translate the whole sort of thing. You can't get a copy of exactly what they're saying, so I can't get the words fully translated. So, but anyways, this older photo from probably, it seems 1930s, 20s, sort of in this sort of range like that, shows, here's a 4,000-year-old depiction that actually matches a Nothosaurus. Okay, here's a depiction here. Look at the sort of the spikes on him. Here's an ancient depiction, the spikes. Here's one from France, the spikes. Here's a sea monster, the spikes, the spikes. Okay, notice how they all sort of do this, right? Okay, so each one. Now look at this dude again, right? See, so like, I mean, to me, like I said, this, whatever this guy was, man, he actually would be sort of described as one of these sort of, you know, dragonish-like sort of things, right? So this could be this creature in even ancient times, since he was still alive in the 1930s, let's say, right? In ancient times, this creature might have been responsible for some sort of dragon sightings in certain areas, because he certainly matches sort of a lot of the sort of stuff here. And I mean, extremely soft. Even interesting here at the top of it, sort of, you can see this weird sort of bump on the bump there. There's almost like a little line-like thing, and I've never been able to figure that out, if it's part of its sort of thing, or like if that was possibly just a little indication of an ear that had eaten away or whatever. But absolutely fascinating. Anyways, now here's one that everybody argues about and claims it's a plastic bag and stuff. I find this ludicrous. Okay, this was taken December 12th, 1964 by Robert Lucerac, okay? Now this guy apparently was wanted because he owed some debts. I mean, that doesn't make somebody a fake artist instantly because all of a sudden you ran out of cash and, I mean, there's 5 zillion people that have done that have also told the truth, right? Sort of thing like that. So that doesn't necessarily make this guy a sort of forger here. Plus, this is 1960s here, okay? So here's the thing. You can clearly see this creature there's a few things. In the front, it looks like it actually has teeth. I can clearly see a bunch of white stuff. So the skeptic's answer is that somebody got a plastic bag, okay? I mean, this is, do you know how much plastic bags you would need? I'll show you the size of the boat. Him and his buddy were out. He was in the one boat. His buddy was out further past that. He went to take a picture of his buddy, and then this creature comes along, and they see this sort of thing, right? And they're staring right at it, sort of, right? And when you see this in a second, you'll notice some fascinating sort of things here. In order for this to be a plastic bag, especially in the 60s, where would you even be able to go down to some local sort of variety store and find 10 trillion plastic bags and sew them all together and somehow then make them not leak and do all this kinds of stuff, then create fake giant eyes and teeth and all kinds of stuff? I mean, the most ludicrous sort of explanation. But like I said, when people can't explain something, they want to give a retarded explanation, right? So yeah, just bear with me a moment. I have to grab something. So there's a bunch of problems with this sort of explanation here for a variety of reasons. Okay, look at the size of this thing, okay? Like, look at this guy's boat in the background, okay? Compared to that sort of thing like that, right? So this would be an extremely complicated sort of thing to pull off in a lot of ways because you'd have to have a lot of material here. I mean, a ridiculous amount because even to fill the material in the guy's boat, like let's say they had to drag along, they now got to sort of somehow get their 2 canoes to be able to drag out this titanic material that's probably about 5 times the length of one of their canoes, sort of idea here. So now you have to think of sort of volume here of how could you fit all this sort of ton of rubber inside these 2 canoes. Then they got to be split in half, right? So, or you can, I suppose you can flop them over somehow. So even if you could somehow drag them and float them all over, okay, so whatever. So now you get them here. Now you got to get this all sort of set up here and stuff like that. But there's piles of problems here. You can see glowing sort of that there's rigid like teeth coming down along in the bottom, and his eyeballs are actually sort of staring right sort of at you, right? Like, I mean, they're absolutely sort of, the thing has, you can clearly see they're up like this, right? And it's very like a giant sort of tadpole sort of a thing. And the guy looked very closely at it, and they said that they saw his eyes move and do different sorts of things, right? And I remember this is the 60s and people only had snap cameras. Almost nobody had a video camera or these sorts of stuff like that. But it looks extremely natural. The color's correct all along. Like, I mean, I don't see any sort of other weird stuff here. The teeth, I can't explain. His eyeballs are quite huge compared to sort of like I said, if you're sort of, you know, you can actually see his eyeballs well, and look at this guy in the background and stuff like I mean, they're very, very large, right? So I just can't believe that somebody was this sort of like, for what reason, what money, he didn't get any money from this, really, sort of thing like that. So yeah, maybe from the odd interview he might have gotten, but that's about it. So I mean, it seems like a lot of work. Then your buddy has to keep the lie going as well. You have to rely on another sort of buddy here to BS for you, okay? So then you got that, and that, you know, there's, like I said, there's a lot of sort of issues here where it doesn't seem very likely that this sort of would have occurred. Like, and that's for you to get all this sort of stuff, to get it all together, just to take a photo. I mean, really? Like, I mean, why wouldn't you take 40 photos? Like, if I went through all that sort of work, you'd get it at different angles and maybe move the monster, you know what I mean? Like, move his tail a little bit for the next photo, and then you take it again, right? Like, when you went through all this trouble and you got this giant monster on it, like, sort of stuff. So it sounds to me like a lot of sort of massive work here, and you can actually see the creature, like I said, eyes here stared at you. It's very sort of, it's weird, right? So, like, I mean, I much more likely that it was some kind of unknown sort of sea, sort of one of these serpent things that have been seen in the past, right? There's been other ones that are similar like this, because it's whalish-like, but except more like a giant tadpole-like sort of thing, like a mega eel with a big titan head, right? So anyways, even though this guy had a bit of a sort of shady this or that or all kinds of stuff, I still... you can even see where the bend has nothing to do with this guy over here. So some people were claiming that he was pulling something, but you can actually see the bend comes back in and starts heading more towards the guy that took the picture this way. So there's these weird things about it that's not very likely in the highest. There's even natural sort of ridges and all kinds of weird stuff as it's going along his body. It seems much... more likely that, yeah, you know, it probably was authentic. From the era, the time, how difficult it would be to Photoshop type of thing like that when they had no Photoshop and that sorts of stuff like that. And that's what things look like when they're under the water in these kinds of watery environments. The pictures come out typically like this. So I would say highly that this is probably in the highest probability not sort of fake, and certainly what I doubt was a rubber monster or any of that sort of stuff. It's too much involvement here, too much material, and just the pure size of it alone, and those eyeballs, in order to even get eyes that huge like that, they would have had to produce them themselves. Maybe you could get this at some Godzilla monster movie company or something. But I mean, the eyeballs are quite large and sort of like they're glary, sort of natural, lifelike looking. So there's too many odd things here. I would suggest more likely that he actually really just did take this and sadly ran out of cash and owed Interpol a few bucks. You know, sort of thing, right? But interesting. Anyways, just another one out there. But next, Brunei River Naga. Now, I mentioned him in another show there and stuff, but there was a couple of things I just wanted to show about this. This Brunei River Naga, recorded seemingly in 2014, was published in 2014, but they did not list exactly the date recorded. Okay, so I want you to look at this interesting part here. Okay, look at the top of his sort of nose here, and you can see these two sensors are actually standing up. Okay. Now, a bunch of people are claiming it's a fake rubber monster being pulled and this and that. These things are not very likely, and I'll show you why. Now here's a close-up now. Now see, in the previous one, they were standing up. Now they're folded right over. And he's opened up his nose fully. And this previous one, you can see is fully shut. Okay? So this is, now you're starting to talk major robotics here and stuff like that, okay? And this is now, here it gets even more interesting, okay? You'll find this even more interesting in a second. So here you can quite see the creature's quite large, okay? So in order for you to have the big robot monster, now remember, this movie's actually been seen by very few know about it. And all kinds of claims it must be a movie monster to this and that, but none of these people have any backing of anything. Okay, so here you can see a portion of the canoe up against it, so you can tell that the creature's fairly sort of a large sort of size to him. But now here's the thing. Here's a close-up as he comes by after, okay? And now look at here, his nose has actually changed position on the left-hand side. He crunched it down. You can see it's actually way shorter. Okay, so look at the bottom left hand, and now you can see the two horns are sticking up. Notice how close it is. There's, on the left-hand side, it's now much narrower, and it's almost closed, okay? Whilst with here, okay, you can clearly see it's fully open and that the sensors on the top are folded over. Yet in this one, now he's crunched it only on the left-hand side. Come on, I mean, that's really insane robotics for no money, for a cheap sort of, that hasn't appeared on a monster movie. People really... Okay, now here's another sort of key feature that proves to be in the highest likelihood this is actually legitimate. You see the gill lines, this strange gill-like material that this creature has on the side of it. So I can understand it. The creature swimming straight. He swims like a gator where he's not moving his head side to side. He almost looks like a robot being pulled through the water. So I can understand why people think that. When I first saw it, that's for the first few seconds. But then after analyzing, I can clearly see this isn't the case. And here's some of the things. Okay. Look at these well-defined. Now this is the best close-up you can get of them here. Okay. And you can see the well-defined. You see this weird gill-like sort of stuff here. These weird crinkly-like things. And his eyeball is more sort of elongated here in this position. It's very close. There's almost no difference, but there is a difference. And you'll see it coming up soon, okay? Now look. See here, those ripples on the side, they're completely closed in. The creature closed them when he got closer to them or whatever in this part. I forget which one's which or whatever, but whenever he was making this next movement, clearly here you can see they all closed up. For robotics, I mean, come on. I mean, now you're talking like all this extra work to make it believable that nobody's even noticed. I'm the only person that's noticed this, and all the comments I've seen about it, I went through 10 million. All these people just keep saying, oh, no, it must be a robot, it's this or that, but it's fake, it's an alligator with a crazy glue on his head, or all kinds of stuff. But, I mean, this can't be. I mean, this actually is a real sort of, and this snag has been reported there for thousands of years, a dragon. It is a type of one of the ones that has been, called a dragon over the massive centuries, right? If I saw that thing running out towards me, I would think he looks pretty dragonish too. Look at the terrific teeth on this thing. But he has this ancient sort of weird thing, he's a lizard, but he has a sort of pig-like, carpish-like sort of snout to So anyways, I find him totally fascinating, but I mean, these things you can't dispute that somehow these are being made to move somehow. So if it's a robot, I mean, this guy spent a massive fortune on a site that nobody's watching and nothing, right? And this same creature's reported in different lakes around this sort of Burma and Thailand and this sort of thing of the same monster, right? So I showed you in last episode 1, and I've mentioned this guy before. So anyways, there you have it. He's certainly interesting, but you can clearly see here again, he's fully closed here. He's fully open here. These structures here now, these gill things are completely gone. They ruffled in, they sort of folded down and sort of whatever. So whatever these things are, maybe they're sensors, maybe there's some kind of gill-like apparatus. Maybe he can breathe underwater and above the water at the same time. Like, I mean, some creatures can do that. Carp can even do that. Like and some kinds of catfish and stuff, they can go bare and different things. So I mean, it would be feasible that such an adaptation out there could exist. So anyways, as far as I'm concerned, that's a real sort of dragon-like sort of creature, whatever he is, that's out there amongst us, right? So I love him. He's certainly an ancient prehistoric thing. I really have a hard time believe this is a fake monster film or something like that. At first, like I said, I fully can understand why people thought this sort of thing, but if you analyze this stuff, for any person to go through all this, it's still never appeared in any monster movie ever, and this is now 2021, and it was 2014, so if they've had 7 years to appear it on their monster movie, it ain't happening, right? So who would make all this, for what reason, when there's no advertising money, there's no anything from anybody here? I mean, you know, there's too many things here that you're dealing with here, these extra sorts of stuff here. I mean, that's really intricate things here to now get the robot to do this or that. I mean, this is, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Hollywood, Terminator effects sort of stuff, right? Yet these are just guys that are right beside it, you know, sort of thing. So anyways, it's whatever he is, he's certainly one strange beast. So, but next, the Swedish worm here. As I've mentioned in other sort of a show from Lake Storage over there in Sweden and stuff like this, and this guy had got this. He had gotten up in the morning and he saw it coming in front of his. He's a farmer guy and stuff like that. But here's some interesting things about this creature. Like, even though people are claiming that the creature isn't moving, it actually does go upstream a bit. Okay, you see it pass a few little sorts of things. Some of the icebergs and the things like that. So it can't be a rope for those reasons, but also there's some other problems. If you look at the front here on the left-hand side, you can see these two bubbly like eyes and this nose-like thing. It's perfect symmetry, that. It's actually identical on both sides and in the front like that. So that's very strange for that to happen like on an ice-like form sort of thing like this. You can see it down here is sort of bumpy, sort of worm-like eyes that he has, okay? So here he comes and he's wiggling past and he goes past over here and he swims left to right. If there was something holding him, like if it was a rope attached in a stream, right? When you can see on the guy's farmer's film, it's actually way up, even way above him, he shows and stuff like that. And so there's nobody there pulling anything or stuff like that. He couldn't have went out in the middle of that fast water and dropped an anchor down there to hold it, sort of thing like this. And it's doing weird things where it actually, some parts of its body will swim for a bit and then other parts stops and slows down and then goes back and forth. I've never seen any of the ropes that were frozen in the water behave this way. They just moved erratically back and forth. They don't move in this sort of fashion. So that's another sort of weird issue that I find a bit unusual, right? Sort of thing like that. But here he is, some of the other ones there, and he's just closer to the iceberg and stuff like that. But you can see, especially this left one here, the bottom ones and stuff like that. The eyeballs on this guy is very strange, and he does go past some of the iceberg, not much. He's not going very quick. But he just kept meandering along, and this guy's a basic, like, farmer guy way up, and this sort of, like, why would he sort of, like, I mean, it's not so, in the higher probability, I don't believe it's a rope. If it was a rope, if something was holding on to that, that head with the fast current would actually be being pulled down. Instead, it rises up quite often at a higher, his cheek is above the water line a little bit. So I find that sort of hard to believe that something's holding that rope in place and it's just a rope being pulled. And it can't be an iceberg and it's not sort of other things. And things can't swim against the current like that. So unless it's alive. So it does fit their description. It's a big giant worm-like sort of stuff. I showed you that one in Alaska that's very similar sort of thing like that. And they're, like I said, in other bodies of water, I've shown you these great worms. This could be one of them, and this actually may actually be him, right? That what he saw. So I'd give it more in the probability as not a rope of any sort. The symmetry in the front looks like some kind of creature-like shape here with two eyeballs and the nose-like structure, a worm-like sort of thing. And he's swimming up against current, which is impossible unless something was holding that and pulling it up forward, and nobody is, and there's nothing there. And it also should have been yanked down more into the water, not staying so high like that. It's like when you pull something, it's going to start diving down a little bit, right? But instead, this thing doesn't do that. You never see stuff like that. So, here's an update there. I'd mentioned you don't be swimming in these Australian rivers. Here's another one here. This was shot in the Pioneer River. 9.7 meters. Look at the size of this dude. So you're telling me you couldn't have you for a snack in 3 seconds, right? So, there you have it. Like I said, just because they're small rivers and stuff like this, as long as the river can make it to the ocean somehow, any kinds of creatures or to some other giant lake that has access to the ocean, whatever the case, any kind of scenario like that, doesn't matter. Any kind of giant animals that may be in these regions can get in these things, and so don't be very careful when you're swimming in rivers in other countries, because I mean here we don't, in Canada it's not likely you're going to see an alligator, right? But I mean even here they've been seen, but I mean it's not likely, let's say, right? But in Australia and other sort of places like that, it's not the same safety zone. So always keep that in mind if you're traveling, that these rivers from Thailand to Africa to other ones, and that have deadly killer creatures in them. And, love them, respect them, take a photograph, but stay far away. So here's an unexplainable one, another one that I can't see. I'm sure some skeptic will say it's a basking shark again. But here's the problems. This was found in the Mediterranean by a deep-sea diving sort of submarine-like little thing that goes along looking for stuff, right? Okay, you can clearly see this creature has some kind of weird, like, beak-like sort of structure. He has some sort of strange head sort of device, like ears, like very typical, like your sea monster or any of the other ones like this. Look at this creature's body. This thing is 30 meters long, just a little over 30 meters long, okay? Absolutely astonishing. And this is brand new, fresh. It's not a fossil here. This dude died recently. They have no idea what he could have been, right? But I mean, 100%, he is already matching what I showed you in my previous books of ancient, early Animalia books describing these great serpents. There's ones that are very similar to this and around the same size, like 100 feet long in this sort of range like this. And this, so 30 meters there, he's like around 90 feet or so, sort of thing like that. That's, pretty friggin' huge, man. Right? sort of like that. So, I mean, this dude is not fitting. The only known whale that can reach this size would be a blue whale. And it's certainly not a blue whale. I mean, a very, very different sort of bone structure here and everything, right? So this creature was not probably very wide and like a great sea snake of some sort. So here's like very good sort of proof right in front that a creature unknown to science, because none of the ones, it's not one of these gelatinous worms. Yeah, there's some worms that can get under it. This is an actual one with a real skeletal sort of stuff to it. He has ears of some sort up at the top and sort of things like that. He matches very much many sort of sea serpent sort of descriptions and things like that, right? So these are the things. So there's some interesting things up there, some interesting finds, and this one was a bit of a shorter sort of a presentation and things like that. And we got an update with the Lochness monster there, and coming up soon. But besides that, though, it was a some of these carcasses are not explained by like it's easy to pass the buck with the basking shark every time, and I can understand why they say that. I showed you some of the things where some of the things are similar, but you can't start adding or discounting things and saying something, well, it must have poofed away or it must have went away. Like, you can't say that a big long front jaw disappeared yet the skin is fully intact all around what's remaining of the creature. In order for that beak to have fallen off, it had to have busted through the skin. That skin shouldn't be there anymore. So there's problems, eh? There's strange sort of things that they show where their explanation isn't proper. It's not going to work. And so this one here is not going to work with the seal. It's not even going to work with an eel, a no eel type, or any of the other sorts of stuff. It's not certainly not a pinniped of any sort. It's not a whale of any sort. It doesn't look whalish of any kind. The top area should be very different and stuff like that. This is again more towards sort of, but obviously this is way bigger than sort of a basking sort of a shark would be in lengthwise or any of these sorts of stuff. Plus they don't have sort of ears, right? And these kinds of things. So like, well, they don't have in that sort of sense, like what they're showing there, right? So, but the thing is that they can certainly hear and feel vibrations and things. But the thing is that this is very different here. And even its speak-like structure in the front and everything, it does match much more these sea orms. So if people are dubious of this stuff, here's a fresh sort of thing that matches very much. Like, you'd still have to explain there is no creature, no one 30 meters long that would fit into this sort of thing, right? Like that. And so, again, you have an interesting sort of thing, right? But where it's, you know, it's definitely interesting anyway, so. And he looks to be like fairly decent size and sort of like a good rounded sort of a healthy sort of whatever it was, right? Sort of thing like that. But it's very sea snakish, right? So very, very interesting. But so who knows? But anyways, all I can tell you is it's not any of the normal suspects that I can think of. So again, I can't categorically tell you what this could have been. But at the same time, these are mysterious ones that are interesting, that certainly are worth a look, that certainly challenge the basking shark theories all the time and stuff like that. So anyways, stay tuned for some more shows there, and next we'll give you an update with the Lochness monster and his entourage crew. So if you have any cryptozoological sightings there, certainly please contact with your story, and I'd love to hear it, and thanks very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day.
Jeanguy smoking the cracker. Hello, love exciting and new. Come aboard, cat potential wives are expecting you. And her wow is life's sweetest reward. Let it float. Trueglow's free checks will float back to you. The halalboat soon will be making another one. The halalboat promises cat eyes for every jihadist gun. Set a course for adventure, you'll land on a new Jeanguy romance. And longing for a wow won't hurt anymore. You will have cat wives to be cooking in and out of the bedroom and more. You will be in warm in love, the halalboat. Soon we'll be making another one. The halalboat promises mega checks for every top-of-all producing gun. Set a course for adventure, you'll land on a noose, sank where romance, and you won't be longing for Hawaii anymore. If we can't find you cat wives, you can purchase cat wives from a port we stop off at for less than a box of halalboat s'mores. It's love, it's love, it's love, in love, in love, in the halalboat, in the halalboat, it's love, in love, it's love.
So, folks, there you have it. That's the new rumored hit series from the CPC, the halalboat. Apparently, rumor has it that as Lochness trueglow pitched the idea of him playing two roles, they did not realize, according to Jeanguys' informants, that trueglow has many clones. Trueglow figures his two characters will be more popular than the Ottawa River's beloved Lochness monster, right? So I mean, I don't know, that's going to be pretty hard to beat. Although we cannot confirm any of these rumors, if true, we look forward to this healthy, wholesome, family fun show. Apparently, the CBC is quite ingenious. They somehow are going to make it look like the big love boat ship, like on the original sort of show, right? But they're actually, because of low budget and it's Canadian and filmed in behind the Parliament buildings, here's an actual photograph of what it really looks like. So somehow they'll be able to do these whole hour sort of shows and get the different guests on and everything all inside this rubber raft. You can see it here now. There's a Lochness monster. I can see him. There's trueglow in the back, or one of his clones possibly. There's two twins. I don't know if that, and that looks like that minister guy. So I don't know, pretty convincing. So maybe that's what they'll be doing after retirement of these sorts of things. But if not, they should try for it if they do, if there's any truth to these rumors. But I mean, look at the rumor, half man, half ape warriors there, and the Lochness monster's been seen, right? So I mean, it could be that they're out there, right? Like, so, But anyway, stay tuned for another show. So thanks, Jeanguy there. Jeanguy's an hilarious character, and that was pretty funny. I enjoyed it, Jeanguy. Anyways, take care. See you next show there, and we'll get some more different new monsters on. Bye for now.